Hello, hi, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. You're welcome again to our basic chemical pathology series. I remain Dr. Iya Izibasi, and we're going to take another interesting topic called water balance. Just sit tight and you will enjoy this lecture. So what do I expect that you should be able to learn during this session? I expect that you should be able to describe the water content of the human body and the body water compartments. You should be able to explain to me what is water balance, how do we gain water, how do we lose water, in what amounts, You should also be able to tell me something about the mechanisms that regulate water balance. Okay? Before I continue, I want to say thank you so much for your support. You guys are great. We are 1,001 subscribers. I'm moving more, and it's all because of you. Please do not forget to share this video to other people who may benefit from it. Don't forget to subscribe. And like the videos and comments. Very, very important. Tell us what you like about our videos. Tell us what you would like us to, do to our videos. All right, so let's look at the water content of the body. You know that I have already explained before in the other video, water is, very, very essential to life. In fact, without water, we would not have life because water has so many uses, and we have dealt, a very exciting video before this, biological uses of water. We've dealt with that. And, water is so essential that if you do look at, the average person's weight, water is responsible for about 60 to 70%, of that weight. Can you believe that? That is wonderful. And water is contained in every kind of tissue, including bone that we think is so dry. Bone contains water. So you find out that things, even like fat, adipose tissue contains like 30%, of water. The brain, that one contains like 80%, bone 10%, muscle 70%. In fact, it's so important that the brain will refuse to function if it is dehydrated, even to a minimum or even 5%. It will just, the function will stop. So we find out that females have a lot of fat compared to males, and males have a lot of, lean muscle mass compared to females. So females do have, lower body water, the percentage of body water compared to men. And we find out that children have the highest level of body water, which is why neonates, children especially, easily get dehydrated when such conditions arise. And water, total body water is also lower in older people and obese people. Obese people because they have, a lot of fat in them. So if we look or analyze a 70-kilogram man, you'll find out that he has about 42 liters of water distributed, in different compartments in the body. The water is not just like in a jerry can, like that. No, it's distributed into different compartments. You have some that reside inside the cells. You have some that, you find it around, the space around the cells. Then you have some that you find inside, the blood. And some other places, some in the eye, vitreous fleas, and all other spaces. We are going to learn about all that. Okay, so total body water, I have said, is about 42 liters, and is divided into two main compartments. You have your intracellular compartment and your extracellular compartment. Your intracellular compartment talks about the water that you find inside the cells in the body. And that water is called the cytosol. And the cytosol is where the organelles of the body are suspended. So all the water you find inside cells are called the extracellular compartment, or the extracellular fluid found in the extracellular compartment. It's about 28 liters. The other compartment, main compartment, is the extracellular compartment, and it contains about 14 liters, and is made up of 3 main compartments. You have your interstitial compartment, your transcellular compartment, and your intravascular compartment. Okay, so your interstitial compartment talks about the water that bathes the outside of the cells. The water that bathes the outside of the cell. And that particular fluid compartment provides, an environment, okay, where the cells can get their nutrients, they can get their oxygen, and they can get other things that they need, and also get rid, of their waste products. And that particular compartment is usually refreshed, by the intravascular compartment, that is by blood, bringing in oxygen, bringing in nutrients, bringing in all that it needs, picks up all those things from there and passes the waste, back, all right? Then you also have the transcellular compartment. Is not a major compartment per se, but it is important because it talks about water in the body that is not easily interchangeable, because I told you that usually there's a relationship, between each of the compartments, but these ones, you have pets of water that are not either, they are not physiologically active, or they don't, interact so much with the other compartments, like fluid that you find in the vitreous humor in the eye, the aqueous humor in the eye, in the CSF is quite conserved. What else? Okay, pleural cavity, pericardial cavity, synovial fluid, amniotic fluid, all those kinds of fluids make up the transcellular compartments, all right? And this makes up about 0.15 liters, about 150 mils in all. It's a minor compartment, but it's important. Then the other compartment, last but not the least compartment, is the intravascular compartment, okay? Intravascular, this has to talk about the fluid inside the vessels. What is that fluid? That fluid is the blood, So the blood inside, the blood vessels, the fluid that makes up blood, is what is called the intravascular fluid. And it's also made up of the fluids you find inside the red blood cells, the fluid you find inside the white blood cells, and all that. You find out that the intravascular fluid, contains a lot of things, solutes, proteins, nutrients, and all that it carries and, supplies to the interstitial from where the cells, get their nutrients and all that. So from all I have said, you will find out that these compartments are not just on their own, they interact, with each other. All right, you find out that you have exchanges between the plasma and interstitial fluid occurring, across capillary walls. You find out that this is the blood supplying nutrients, supplying oxygen, supplying every other thing that it supplies to the interstitial fluid. The cells get those nutrients from the interstitial fluid, across the capillary membranes, and they release the waste products and other things that they produce. And this is also picked up by the blood vessels, through the capillary membranes, all right? Then also, if there is maybe a little leakage, this will also be picked up by the lymphatic system and also carried to the bloodstream. So you will find out that exchanges between the plasma and the interstitial fluid occurs across the capillary walls, while exchanges between the interstitial fluid and intracellular fluid occurs across plasma membranes. And these transportations are guided by forces like hydrostatic forces, like oncotic forces, and some other forces that enable these fluids to move, across this membrane, either by diffusion, osmosis, and all that. You should also know that these fluids contain solutes like sodium and chloride. Sodium is one ion that is highly responsible for osmotic pressure, okay? All right, so it's contained in all these fluids in different, concentrations, especially like if you're looking at the extracellular fluid, you will find out that sodium is quite high in the extracellular fluid compared to the intracellular fluid, where potassium is the main cation there. It contains also other solutes like chloride, like bicarbonate, sulfates, magnesium, calcium, and all other types of solutes. Also the blood, I have said before, contains proteins, blood cells, and every compartment is an active, compartment. So you will find out that for homeostasis to occur, our bodies have to be able to control, this water in our bodies. And that control is what is called water balance, all right? And that water balance occurs, when there is an equilibrium sort of between the water we are taking in, which is our water gain, and the water we are losing, which is our water output. You can call it water input, water output. You can call it water gain, water loss, okay? So when you have, the body has this ability to control this water balance, that's our gain and loss of water. When this occurs, or when this occurs, it is called water homeostasis, all right? So as long as this water balance exists, you find out that the osmotic concentration of the body fluids will remain as it should, okay? So once there's a kind of change in the osmotic concentration of the solution in our bodies, you will have changes also in water balance, all right? These changes may be positive, they may be negative, and they could result in dehydration or intoxication. So it is very important for us to be able to maintain a good water balance. So we will say that water balance is or occurs when water input is equal to water output. So how do we gain water? The most way we get water is by drinking water, which is responsible for 60% of all the gained water. And also when you eat moist food, you also gain water, which is absorbed by the small intestine and large intestine. And also water can be gained in the body as a byproduct, of cellular respiration. It's a minor way, but it also contributes about 1/10 of all the gained water. So how do we lose water? Don't mind this, my cartoon here. In urine, we lose most of the water, about 60%. We also lose some water when we sweat. We sweat because it helps to maintain our body temperature. We also lose water in feces, no matter how strong it is. You also lose water there. And also when we breathe, and through our skin, we also lose water. If you go to a mirror and blow on the mirror, you will see something like steam on the surface of the mirror. That is water, that you are losing. So this is a schematic diagram showing how much we take in, water, food, metabolic water through cellular respiration, how much we lose fluid. And we find out that our intake, 2,500 mils per day, should be equal to our output, which is 2,500 mils per day, to be able to say we have water balance or fluid balance. So what are the mechanisms that God has put in place to regulate this water balance? We find out that there are 3 main mechanisms that regulate water balance. Can you mention them? Let's try. Let me hear What do you have to say? Okay, you have thirst, you have antidiuretic hormone, and you have the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system. So what did I say? Thirst, antidiuretic hormone, and the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system. All right. The first thing I'm going to look at is thirst. In fact, right now, I'm very thirsty after having talked for long. All right. You find out that we have in our hypothalamus what is called the thirst center. And usually this thirst center is stimulated when we have decreased saliva production, right? Like now I've been talking, my mouth is dry, my throat is dry, okay? So my dry mouth and my dry throat will cause a kind of stimulation of what is called tactile receptors. These tactile receptors are located in the mucosa of the mouth, all right? And when they are stimulated, they send signals to the thirst center and stimulate the thirst center, telling us that we are thirsty. When we have that feeling of thirst, we drink water. Another thing that may cause the thirst center to be stimulated is a decline in the plasma volume. If you have a decline of about 10 to 15%, that's about 400 to 500 mils of water is lost from your body. Thus, thirst center will also be stimulated. Also, there are things called osmoreceptors that we have in our body that are able to detect changes in plasma osmolarity. If you have a change of 1 to 2%, immediately those osmoreceptors are stimulated and the thirst center is also stimulated and you feel like drinking water. Also, when blood pressure is low, there are things called baroreceptors that are located in certain organs, okay, that find out about that are stimulated when blood levels are low, because blood pressure will be low, blood flow will be low. So the baroreceptor kinds of like picks it up and sends input to the thirst center, causing, a cascade of events to happen. All right, the thirst center is stimulated. Apart from that, when the baroreceptors are stimulated, there is a cascade called the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone cascade that is stimulated. Part of what is produced is angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 has also the capacity to stimulate the thirst center. So usually when you drink a cup of water, your mouth gets moistened. The mucosa of the mouth and the throat gets moistened. That is one of the first signals that is sent to say that you have rehydrated yourself. Also, when you drink and your stomach is distended, there are receptors in the stomach, stretch receptors, that send, feedback input, telling the thirst center that, look, we are okay. We are okay, we are okay, we are okay. So after looking at tests as a mechanism, another mechanism you'll be interested in looking at is the antidiuretic hormone. And it's interesting because it's a hormone that is produced by the hypothalamus and it's stored in the pituitary gland, in the posterior part of the pituitary gland alongside oxytocin. So what does this peptide hormone do? What it does is that it causes insertion of water channels in the membrane of cells that line the collecting ducts, thereby allowing water to be reabsorbed. Okay, so anytime you have like a decrease in the ECF volume, maybe caused by dehydration, blood loss, and all those things, what happens is that it is stimulated, and then it causes insertion of water channels in the renal interstitium and encourages the reabsorption of water, thereby water is added into the system. So if you do not have ADH, little water will be reabsorbed in the collecting duct and dilute urine will be produced. But when it is stimulated and is working, you will have reabsorption of water and concentrated urine being produced. So just like thirst, the production or the stimulation of, or the secretion rather, of antidiuretic hormone is influenced by several factors. One of the factors is that if you have increased plasma osmolarity, usually you have increased plasma osmolarity when you lose some water from the body without losing solutes. Okay, so when you have increased plasma osmolarity, what happens is that the osmoreceptors are stimulated to release ADH secretion. When that is released, water reabsorption is increased. All right, so increased blood volume also, when you have too much water in the system, will cause increased blood pressure. So when this happens, you have stretch receptors that are located in the atria of the heart being stimulated. And when these are stimulated, you have ADH secretion being inhibited. What is the goal of that? You want to reduce water reabsorption. So when you reduce water reabsorption, you produce more urine, you get rid of the excess water in the body, and water balance is restored. So the third thing is that if you have decreased blood volume, what happens is that there are things called baroreceptors that kind of pick this fall in blood pressure. When these baroreceptors pick those signals, they help to stimulate ADH secretion. Action being that if ADH secretion is stimulated, there will be reabsorption of water. Reabsorption of water will cause the ECF to increase, thereby bringing a state of water balance. You see, so this is a very dynamic, situation, and interesting. So another situation we want to look at, the mechanism we want to look at will be the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. Just like ADH regulates, the water body content, you need a system that will also regulate the osmolarity, because when ADH reabsorbs water, what it does is it reabsorbing water without any solutes. So what the system, the renin-angiotensin system, does is to regulate, the solute content of the body. And by regulating the solute content of the body, it regulates osmolarity. Actually, what it actually does is that it encourages the reabsorption of sodium, okay, at the expense of potassium. So, and we all know that sodium is the major solute in the ECF. So it effectively determines the osmolarity of the ECF. So what it does is that it regulates the amount of sodium in the body. Why is it important? Because when you have extreme variations, look at my cells, one is shrinking, the other one is lysing. If you have extreme variation in osmolarity, what happens is that the cells will either shrink or they will swell. And if any of this happens, it's bad because it damages or destroys the cellular structure, and then you have the normal cellular function also being disrupted. Okay, homeostasis cannot be achieved. So you want to regulate the osmolarity of blood in a very tight manner, okay? And that regulation of that osmolarity is achieved by balancing your intake and your excretion of sodium with that of water. So aldosterone helps to regulate the excretion of sodium. So, like I have said, the kidneys actually have a major part in this mechanism of reabsorption of sodium in the distal nephron, and the hormone aldosterone produced by the adrenal cortex, the steroid hormone aldosterone, is responsible for controlling the reabsorption of sodium in the distal nephron. So how is its secretion controlled? For one, the adrenal cortex itself, directly senses plasma osmolarity, whether there are increases or there are decreases. So when it senses that the osmolarity of the ECF has increased, above normal, what it does is that it inhibits the secretion of aldosterone. What does this do? When aldosterone secretion is inhibited, you will have more sodium being filtered freely in the lumen into the urine. All right, so thereby it reduces the amount of sodium in the blood, in the body, thereby bringing down that osmolarity that has increased, and vice versa. Very interesting, isn't it? Secondly, the kidneys also, I remember those baroreceptors I talked about, the kidneys use them to sense low blood pressure. You know, when the blood pressure is low, the renal blood flow will be low. Baroreceptors that are located there pick up this signal and they trigger the renin-angiotensin system by a very, very interesting manner. So the renin-angiotensin system is composed of the enzyme renin, the hormone angiotensin 2, and aldosterone. So it's called the renin angiotensin aldosterone system. Someone else will call it the renin aldosterone angiotensin system. So what happens is that there are specialized cells located in the kidney, the macular densa of the kidney, called the juxtaglomerular cells. When renal blood flow is low, these specialized cells are activated to produce the enzyme renin. Renin is a proteolytic enzyme. What is a proteolytic enzyme? It's something that cuts up proteins. So what it does is that it's released into the bloodstream and it cleaves a decapeptide from a globulin called angiotensinogen, which is already in the blood, okay? The decapeptide that is cleaved is called angiotensin 1. All right, it has relatively little activity, so it has to be enhanced by cleaving 2 amino acids out of that decapeptide to give you angiotensin 2. And the enzyme that does this cleavage is called angiotensin converting enzyme, which are located in the lungs. All right, when that happens, you now have an octapeptide that is called angiotensin 2. This angiotensin 2 has many, actions. Number one, it is a potent vasoconstrictor. When it does that, it helps the vessels to constrict, and when the vessels constrict, blood pressure is increased because there is an increase in total peripheral resistance. All right. Also, secondly, it has the ability to stimulate thirst. Yes, it does have the ability to stimulate thirst. So it also stimulates thirst and makes somebody thirsty. You're drinking water. Thirdly, and most importantly, it has the ability also to stimulate the adrenal cortex to produce aldosterone, which is the steroid hormone I'm talking about, that regulates sodium content. So when that is produced, when that is secreted, what happens is that it works on the distal nephron to increase reabsorption of sodium, thereby increasing osmolarity and also increasing water that enters the system. Why? Because for every sodium that is reabsorbed, you have 6 molecules of water also being reabsorbed. So you have reabsorption of sodium and you also have reabsorption of water. So this is its own contribution also to water balance. All right. So having come to the end, I want to give you an assignment. I will collect this assignment when next we have our class, and it will be graded. So the assignment says that you should, with a label diagram, explain the renin-angiotensin aldosterone cascade. And also remember to state the effect of the cascade and which of the components is responsible for which effects. All right? So till I see you next time, take care of yourself. Bye-bye. Bye.